Wow, what's this? Can someone come here quick?
And the loud yell from my husband echoed from the bathroom. As I rushed to see what was happening, the sight of my husband made me gasp, my own scream bouncing off the walls. Looking at my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, their faces were clearly panicked. I bet they are the culprits. Earlier this morning, I overheard them talking. They were discussing something outrageous, like sending me to the afterlife, putting an end to me. The real target is me. Even the thought of what would have happened had I been the one in there is too terrifying to bear. I'll never forgive them. As I made up my mind, I noticed my husband standing next to me. Seemed to share my sentiment. I'm Betty, 35 years old. I work in a call center. My husband Tim, who is the same age as me, works in a factory. We met at a 24/7 fitness gym. I've been going to the gym for 3 years now, so I have a regular crowd I see there. Most of the time, I didn't interact much, just listened to music with my earbuds in, silently doing my workout. One morning, as I was about to use the machine at the gym, the belt on the machine slipped off. Never having had this happen before, I panicked, thinking I might have broken it. At that hour, there was no staff around. With tear-filled eyes, I looked around helplessly. No matter what I did, I couldn't fix it. That's when my husband approached me.
Are you okay? This thing has been slipping off quite often recently,
he said, easily fixing it. Thank you so much. I thanked him with a relieved face. Tim's body was muscular and he was of good build, one of the regulars I often noticed. After that, we started talking whenever we met. The fact that we were the same age, had irregular working schedules, and other commonalities brought us closer. And before I knew it, we had become quite close. Despite not knowing each other for a long time, we could chat openly like old friends. I was really comfortable around him. 3 months after our first conversation, we started dating. After dating for 2 years, we decided to get married. I was so happy when he proposed, I immediately said yes. That same day, however, Tim struggled to say,
Betty, it's okay to say no if you don't like it, but would you consider living with my family?
I hadn't thought about living with his family and didn't know what to say. Tim continued,
We'll put locks on our room to protect our privacy. You won't need to do household chores either. I know your job can be irregular and it's tough. My mom and sister aren't working. If they give you any trouble, I'll protect you. My mom hurt her leg, and it seems like they could use an extra pair of hands around the house.
I could tell he was considering my comfort in the situation. He must have also noticed that I was not entirely pleased with the idea. I knew his mother had been hospitalized for a while after a fall in the bathroom. Even so, it was a tough decision. I couldn't easily agree to this. I suggested, how about I meet your mom and sister first, and then make my decision? Tim seemed relieved when I said that. A week later, we went to greet his family at his parents' house. Tim lost his father 5 years ago. His mother apparently worked as an administrative assistant until retirement. His sister is 3 years older than us, and recently started living with them after getting divorced.
Hello there! Thanks for coming!
Tim's mother welcomed us with a smile as we entered the house. Upon hearing her voice, his sister came to the entrance and greeted us energetically. Nice to meet you. I'm Tim's sister. Congratulations on your marriage. We chatted in the living room for a while after that. Both Tim's mom and sister were very lively, and I was laughing the whole time. I felt I could talk to them freely without holding back. Did Tim talk to you about living together? I'm sorry, it's my fault because of my bad leg. His mother apologized on our way out. We won't disturb your newlywed life, Tim's sister assured me too. After meeting and talking to them directly, I felt it might be okay living with them. So I responded, of course, I'd be glad to. Everyone looked relieved and thanked me. I can't say I was completely without concerns, but I felt we could build a happy home together with these people. A month later, I started living at Tim's family home. Just as Tim had promised, our room had a lock and his mother and sister couldn't come in. Thinking about our newly married life started making me feel excited. Both my husband and I have jobs with irregular schedules, and we often have night shifts. While we were unpacking after the move, we realized we might often miss each other, but we made a point to cherish the time we spent together. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were just as cheerful and kind as when we first met. They took care of most of the housework, so I only had to help out a bit. I noticed my mother-in-law having trouble walking, so I decided to do what I could in her stead. However, one day, my husband was at work, and I was off after a night shift. I got home in the early morning, and when I woke up in the afternoon, I found my mother-in-law and sister-in-law at the dining table. "Hey, don't you think you should be more proactive about doing chores?" my sister-in-law asked, to which I was taken aback. As I was at a loss for words, my mother-in-law chimed in. "It's nice to be healthy and just stay in your room all the time, isn't it?" Their tone was so unlike their usual selves that I wondered if I was dreaming. "I'm sorry, I'll be more careful from now on," I responded timidly, to which my sister-in-law replied, "Don't tell Tim anything unnecessary." "Okay, I understand," I replied, and went to the bathroom to wash my face. I wasn't sure whether I was dreaming or not, but I realized that despite what my husband said, I had been relying too much on my mother-in-law and sister-in-law for housework. Feeling a bit of remorse, I took on more chores that day. However, they seemed displeased with my housekeeping and remanded me multiple times. As I was cooking dinner, my husband came home. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were sitting on the couch watching TV.
"Is Betty cooking dinner? She must be tired from her night shift,"
he said with a surprised look on his face, and started to say something to my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. But before he could, I interjected. "No, it's okay. I wanted Tim to have some of my homemade cooking for a change. I decided to take charge of dinner tonight." My husband seemed very pleased. During dinner, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were completely different from the afternoon, saying, "This is delicious, Betty. You're really good at cooking." And, "Teach me how to make this next time," in a cheerful manner. I thought to myself, these people must be two-faced. From then on, they became strict with me on days when my husband wasn't home. I used to live alone, so it's not that I can't do housework. Their frequent criticism was somewhat annoying, but I went about my chores smoothly, though they always seemed dissatisfied. Then one day, as my husband and I were watching TV, my mother-in-law stood up to go to the bathroom. She seemed to be having a particularly bad day and was having a hard time walking, so I stood up to support her. But after a few steps, she suddenly fell. "Ouch, Betty! Why did you push me?" she cried, crouching down and holding her leg. I hadn't pushed her, of course. To me, it looked as if she had fallen on purpose. Hearing her cry out, my husband rushed over and asked,
"Mom, are you okay? Betty, did you push her?"
as he looked at me. When I attempted to deny the accusation, she dramatically sobbed. "She pushed me hard. In fact, she's done this multiple times on the days Tim isn't home. How cruel. Just because she didn't want to live together with us." At this point, my sister-in-law emerged from her room and exclaimed in a seemingly exaggerated tone, "Mom, did she do it to you again?" while glaring at me. As I stood there flustered, Tim lashed out at me.
"Betty, if you have any problems, talk to me. There's no need to take it out on Mom."
This was the first time he had raised his voice at me since we've been together. He didn't see the moment his mom fell. I was devastated that he quickly assumed and didn't even consider the possibility that I wouldn't do such a thing. "I didn't do anything," I said, tears welling up in my eyes. I fled to my room to escape the situation. As I looked back through my tears, I saw my sister-in-law smirking. This was definitely done on purpose. After a while, Tim came back into the room and said,
"I'm sorry for yelling earlier. Maybe because Mom has trouble walking, it seemed to her like she was being pushed. You don't have to worry about it.
It was nice of him to apologize, but he didn't seem to even consider the possibility that his mom had deliberately fallen. It also seemed like he didn't fully trust me. From then on, fearing more false accusations, I stopped helping my mother-in-law as much. About a month later, I finished my night shift and got home around 4 a.m. It was usually a time when everyone was asleep, so I quietly entered the house. But on that day, it felt like someone was awake. Thinking it was Tim, I headed towards the living room when I heard whispering from the bathroom. As I pressed my ear against the bathroom door, I heard my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's voices saying, "That would be the end of her. She is going to like the other side." I was shocked by the conversation I'd overheard. I was terrified, wondering what they might do to me. Careful not to alert them, I quietly made my way to my room. I got into bed without taking a shower, but I couldn't sleep as their conversation kept replaying in my mind. The next day, I was scheduled to attend a friend's wedding. I had hardly slept due to fear, not knowing what they might do to me if I stayed in this house. But I said to Tim, "I'm going shopping for tomorrow's wedding," and left the house at the same time as him. Tim looked concerned, asking,
"Haven't you slept at all?"
That day, I decided to contact Tim so we could have dinner together and return home. I couldn't bring myself to tell Tim about what I overheard in the morning. When we got home, Tim said,
"There's a show I want to watch tonight,"
and sat down on the couch. Seeing this, my mother-in-law, seeming overly pleased, said, "Betty, you have a wedding to attend early tomorrow, right? Why don't you take a bath first?" I thought it was odd for someone to suggest that I take a bath. I usually am the last one to bathe. Suspicious, I went to check the tub and found some kind of black liquid floating in it. I couldn't quite figure out what it was. Could it be some unusual bath additive? It had a unique smell to it. However, having overheard a conversation this morning, I was scared to be the first one in. After confirming that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were chatting in the kitchen, I sidled up to my husband and whispered, so only he could hear, "We've got 30 minutes till the show starts. Why don't you take a bath first?"
"Good idea. I'll jump in quickly,"
he said, and headed for the bathroom. I took his place on the sofa.
"Whoa, what's this? Can someone come here, please?"
I could hear my husband shouting from the bathroom. I don't think more than 3 seconds had passed since I'd heard the sound of him getting into the bath. When I rushed over, I saw my husband's body had been dyed jet black. I let out a cry of surprise. Looking back, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were standing there with panicked looks on their faces.
"What should I do? How did this happen?"
My husband was frantically saying. I asked, "Mother-in-law, you prepared the bath, didn't you? What is that black liquid?" My mother-in-law, flustered, stuttered out, "Wasn't Betty supposed to bathe first?" My sister-in-law was standing next to her, breaking out in a cold sweat. Then my husband sniffed the air and said,
"Could this be hair dye? What are you going to do about this? It's hard to get it off once it's on skin."
My mother-in-law and sister-in-law said nothing, so for now, my husband got out of the bath and moved into the living room. I'd read online that makeup remover could be used to get it off, so I gave some to my husband. He was scrubbing hard, but it didn't seem to be coming off easily. The thought of what would have happened if I'd been the one to get in made me shudder. I would have had to go to a wedding the next day with my body all covered in black dye. Moreover, I have very sensitive skin. There was one time I had my hair dyed, and even though they used a mild colorant, I couldn't stand the pain during the process and had to stop halfway. My scalp was severely irritated, and I felt unwell for a while after that. If I had gotten into a bath filled with hair dye, getting dyed black all over would have been the least of my problems. Most likely, I would have broken out in itches and pains all over my body, which would have been a terrible ordeal. Scrubbing hard to get it off would probably severely damage my skin too. Knowing what they did, The thought that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were involved is horrifying. I helped my husband Tim, vigorously scrubbing the hair dye off his skin. Watching us desperately trying to remove it, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were whispering frantically to each other. Though we couldn't completely remove the stain, we managed to make it far less noticeable. Then I said, "Mother-in-law, sister-in-law, Tim, I need to talk. Please sit here at the dining table." I prompted them to sit down. "The two of you were in the bathroom this morning around 4 a.m., right?" When I mentioned that, my sister-in-law quickly responded, "What are you talking about? We were obviously sleeping at that hour." But it was clear she was flustered. When my husband asked, "What were you talking about?" I told him. They were saying things like, "Betty's done for. She's going to the other side." Surprised, Tim said,
What? What does that mean?
His mother retorted, "Were you dreaming or something? There's no proof of such a thing." Then I pointed to my husband and said, "This is the proof. When we got home, you suggested I take a bath, didn't you, Mother?" I found that strange. I had mentioned that I have sensitive skin, and our wedding is tomorrow, remember? My sister-in-law snapped back, "Oh, come on. It was just a little prank."
A prank?
Tim asked with a stern face, leaving my sister-in-law silent. Then his mother childishly complained, "It's Betty's fault. She doesn't help around the house at all." To this, Tim shouted back at his mother and sister,
Are you serious? Betty is working. She does the chores whenever she can. Just because you're unsatisfied doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. Cut the crap.
"I've been putting up with your unreasonable behavior all this time. Do you have such resentment against me? This isn't something that can be brushed off as a prank. I will never forgive you for this," I said. Hearing our words, his mother and sister broke down crying. "I'm sorry. We went too far." Then Tim said,
I will never forgive you either. I don't want to be family with people who do things like this. Leave by tomorrow.
"But where are we supposed to go? We don't have anywhere to go," his mother argued, to which Tim retorted,
That's not my problem. There's no way we can live together anymore. Be ready to leave by tomorrow.
Once Tim and I returned to our room, I could no longer hold back my tears. I had been scared ever since I overheard their conversation that morning. I'm sorry I let Tim take a bath after hearing their conversation. I apologized through my tears. Tim reassured me.
It's okay, Betty. I'm really glad you didn't take a bath. You've been through a lot, haven't you? I'm sorry I didn't realize it earlier.
He embraced me. The next day, Tim forcibly drove his mother and sister out. They moved to our house just before we got married, and since the house is under Tim's name, he had the right to do so. He changed the locks while I was away at our wedding. Neither his mother nor sister have jobs. They had a bit of money left from the living expenses we had given them, but not enough to rent a place. They tried asking relatives for help, but it seems that they were turned away after Tim explained the situation to them. They ended up taking a loan to rent a place, but they weren't approved due to their lack of employment. Having almost no work history, and with the rumors spreading around the neighborhood, they were unable to find even a part-time job. Currently, they seem to be sleeping in a youth hostel. They brought it upon themselves, I reckon. The life of just me and my husband began. Though we often have conflicting schedules, we exercise together at the gym or go for a morning run when our timings align. I'm living each day with a truly invigorating feeling. On days when we can eat together, I make homemade meals.
You're coming off a night shift today, aren't you? You don't have to push yourself,
my husband Tim says, but I'm delighted to be able to feed him.
Delicious. Did your cooking skills level up again?
Tim always praises me. These moments are my happiness. Though there may be difficulties in the future, I want to live our lives helping each other.